everyone. Welcome to the Impossible to Inevitable podcast. Today is an unbelievable honor, privilege, treat, and pleasure. I'm ecstatic to introduce you all to Craig Weatherup. I was introduced to Craig through an incredible organization, Path North, and we actually met virtually in the pandemic and then have been together and many times in many events since. And he is an unbelievable model of leadership, servant leadership, and service across all three of the domains that are most important to me. The personal domain, unbelievable integrity, and the goal settings process that he's laid out is one of the most unbelievable and transformational of my entire life. Relationally, his relationship with his wife and his pursuit of excellence and a complete dyadic engagement is unbelievable. And then professionally, which most people would know him for, he has dominated in every category and lived multiple lifetimes in one. He's including running PepsiCo, chairman of the board for Starbucks, and most recently really driving impact in the future of education. So sir, thank you for condensing 10 lifetimes into one, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Curt. This is a new experience, so we'll see where it goes.
Absolutely. Well, you know the model of first is how do we help serve anyone in the audience that at some point we've all had that thing where something feels impossible, right? And feels impossible because we don't yet have a path through. And so it's easy for everyone to believe that, okay, if I looked at Craig's life arc, it must have been good, awesome, and then perfect, right? It must have been a direct line to an outstanding life. And I'm sure you've had, and you've shared with me some of, but what felt to you impossible at the time, and then what did you do to then overcome that and then make it inevitable?
Right. Yeah, I have one example I thought I'd share. You're talking about things that require, a degree of resolve and courage, willingness to fail, and leadership. And I've had a number of them. One bucket is just kind of crisis things, from a Madonna boycott to Pepsi syringes and Michael Jackson hair on fire and those kinds of things. So they've been personal and public at the same time.
Those small events that no one else knows about, sir.
Right, yeah, little events. But the one that really captures, I think, some of the things that might be more relevant is back in 92. So that's a long time ago for your audience, but 1992. Basically, I was CEO of Pepsi. Business was great. Things were humming along. No issues outside of the ordinary issues. And basically made the decision that we needed to radically change the portfolio of products of the company from Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Diet Pepsi. And that came out of basically sitting down with my marketing guy and the market research group, which I did once a year. And they presented kind of a brand assessment from a market data standpoint. And they presented the fact that the cola category, and obviously we own half the cola category and Coke owns the other half. I have a real enemy in Coke. But anyhow, this category was never going to grow again because they look at this cohort data, the age break. And thus older people were consuming a lot, but were dying off, and this younger group was consuming less. So the cohort data said the cola category will never, ever grow again. And it never has. So that was the starting point. So basically decided that, we needed to open up our portfolio and go into some new categories, the biggest beverage categories there were. So we went into water, tea, coffee, and sports drinks. And in the case of water, tea, and coffee, there really were no major, in the case of coffee and tea, no ready-to-drink brands of any kind. So basically that was the decision. The challenge, and we were going to do it all at once, and we knew Coke would never do it, so it was an advantage to us. We could be the first mover, disrupt the status quo. The reason it was impossible was no one agreed that it was a good idea. No
Absolutely.
one.
You had to undermine and tear apart the very business that had built unbelievable success.
So nobody agreed with me, but I believed I had a strategy, which is, for me, is job one. Number two, I was confident that I had the decision-making ability and the courage to pull the trigger on those decisions, and I was confident that I could lead this through all the levels that it needed. And when I say no one was with me, I presented to the board of the directors, the cola category will never grow again, and one of the board members says, well, excuse me, Craig, isn't it your job to grow the category? You have half of it. You're supposed to grow it.
Of course, do more of the same, but better.
Yeah. And if you can't grow it, you got to take share from Coke. And I said, well, with all due respect, Mr. Board Member, it's not going to happen. This category is not going to grow. So anyhow, the board didn't want to do it. Wall Street, when I introduced this to our shareholders, I was down on the street making an analyst presentation. They, of course, all hated it. Wait, business is good, things are going. Why don't you stick with your knitting? Haven't you ever heard about sticking to your knitting, right? My senior team, which was also pretty fat, dumb, and happy, and why do this and why now? It doesn't make any sense. We don't need to do this. And then the biggest challenge of all was the front line, the troops. So I had 40,000 route salesmen, 20,000 Teamsters, and 20,000 non-union. And basically, they like selling, 10 big cases of Pepsi at a time and 20 cases of Mountain Dew. And these were little itty bitty products, like bottles of Frappuccino or bottles of iced tea. And the troops said, basically, and this is the PepsiCo term, was this is all foo-foo stuff. What are you doing with this new age foo-foo stuff? So I had 40,000 guys who said, no way. So that was the backdrop. And but I think I felt I'd been in that job.
It's such an amazing story to listen to now, sir, 30 plus years later, knowing how prescient that vision was, but how unbelievably terrifying it must have been, to hold that coherent field against all of those other, dissenting bodies, both your bosses, bosses, and the public. So you're speaking to it because it was known that you had that coherent, resonant, I believe I can do this. Where do you source that type of deep confidence and belief in your capacity to drive transformation? Because at the time, it's fun now because everything that you're saying has come to complete fruition. So it's easy to say, of course, but at the time, I'm assuming based on the reaction from everybody else, that was not obvious, nor was it anything that they wanted done.
No, that's and right. Everybody's very happy with the status quo, but I think my belief has come from at this stage in my career. I was 45, something like that, whatever. And I had been through. My philosophy was always to expand my breadth of learning, personal, professional, you name it, and that meant by definition getting out of my comfort zone, taking the risk, being willing to fail, and value the failure. So I had been through this scenario in different ways. And actually, by this time in my career, from marketing cereals at General Foods to being in Japan and getting beat to death by Coca-Cola and all over the world, dealing with crisis and situation. I think I'd built up a reservoir of not so much just confidence, but just sheer, confidence that I could resolve what I needed to resolve. I built up. I was confident. People, by hook or by crook, I had worked hard at my leadership model, and most importantly, especially in my job, because I had so many huge people, was how did you get followership? And I was confident people would follow me, not because I had good ideas, because in this case they thought the idea was terrible, not because I'm so charismatic or handsome, which obviously I'm not. Everybody can tell that, and not because I'm just so brilliant, right? People followed me because they knew I care about them, and I had demonstrated myself, really from the time I was 21 years old to this point in my career, that people would follow me because I cared about them. And to me, people can follow you for a lot of reasons, but passionate, driven, stick with you followership comes from the fact that people know I care about them. I cared about their jobs, their dignity, their work, and they knew it. They knew it, and they knew me because of that. And so anyhow, at the end of the day, I figured somehow I'd get the board, Wall Street, my own team, and these 40,000 men and women to follow me. And that gave me the confidence to kind of pull the trigger. And Wayne, the board chair, said, "You can go ahead, Craig. It's your neck." And so I said, "Okay." And I more or less started convincing Wall Street that, hey, what's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't work. What's the big deal? And my own guys, you don't have any choice. Get on the boat. And with the troops, it was I know it's kind of silly maybe, and it sounds kind of, but basically it was asking them to do it. I'd like you to do it. I want you to do it for me. It was pretty much that. I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And of course, not every single one of these 40,000 men and women knew me, but they knew of me, and they knew enough to trust that, well, if Craig thinks this is a good idea and he really wants to do it, then we'll give him the pass and we'll go with him.
Oh, so
And that,
exciting, sir. I mean, Jim Clifton is a friend of mine that runs Gallup, and you just articulated brilliantly. I don't, I'll get the exact words of the question, but they said there's one question that determines whether someone's a flight risk for an organization or whether they'll stay and give their all forever. And the question is, there's one person in this organization that has my professional development and future, like at the epicenter of what they're concerned about. And so to me, what you just articulated, you had the ability to articulate the up, to the board, down
right.
to your team, and more broadly to the entire organization. And I think if it's okay to start with, for the organization, I think it's so powerful. One of the stories you'd shared with me about how you won over,
Oh,
the
yeah.
40,000 members of the team that clearly you can't get to all of them. But I thought this was the most, I love, as a SEAL, I love counterinsurgencies. And so to me, you were running a full counterinsurgency of trust to
Yep.
establish that trust. But I thought it was an unbelievable
Yeah.
story, if you don't mind sharing, sir.
No, that's a great way to articulate it. I hadn't thought about it in those. This was again before iPhones and the internet, so this was one-on-one, word of mouth kind of building up. But I had I wanted people to know me, and I wanted to know them. And again, I'm talking about the troops, the front line. Again, there were altogether probably 70,000 of them. But the sales guy, I wanted them to know me, and so I'd be at a warehouse at 5:30 every morning. I'd meet with them and all that stuff. I'd tour the plant. I always talked to the forklift driver because he was the low man on the totem pole. So I would always seek out the forklift driver, and so on. So any way I could to get to know them. But I wanted them to know me as something other than the guy with a suit who flies in on a private jet and gets picked up by their boss at the airport. So I would go out every summer and go out with one of these huge tractor trailer trucks. I mean, I could barely get up into the thing; it's so high off the ground. But go out with a bulk driver, go out with a merchandiser, or one of the guys, no management, and I'd wear my Pepsi Blues, right, and just sweat along with the guys. Anyhow, I went out. My story that I think I shared with you was I went out with a mechanic. So he had 12 calls to make. He had to repair a fountain machine, he had to repair a vending machine, and so on. And so I went out with him, and just me and him had a fabulous day, just like you would, Curt. I just ended up BSing with him all day long. So he was way behind his schedule, way behind his schedule. And we got to, it was in Vegas. It was probably 110 degrees. It was the middle of the summer. And
Nice and cool.
Nice and cool. And we're in the Shark Club, which, if you can imagine the Shark Club in Vegas, it was about the dumpiest strip club you'd ever want to go in. So I'm behind the bar with him, and he's doing all the stuff, and he's trying to make me, useful, or I'm trying to be useful. So he gives me the bar gun that was broken. He says, so you need to fix this bar gun with all the little buttons you press for soda.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I take the cover off, and of course, like an idiot, the springs all go all over the place under the bar. And I'm under the bar, and the slime is like, yay deep, right? And of course, this guy's thinking, this guy Weatherup's a flake. Anyhow, so we finished that, and at the end of the day, he drops me off at the hotel. I'm going to go out to dinner with the guys. He's got to go back to his route, right, to finish all his sales calls. And this true story, believe it or not, and again, this may be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By the time I got back to New York, I made a couple other stops, came back to New York. It was literally like everybody in the world knew about what an idiot Weatherup had made of himself at the Shark Club in Vegas. Literally everybody, and maybe not every single one of the 40,000 Teamsters, but most of them knew. And the story
35,000 plus.
So that was, not. I wish actually you have to be legit. I mean, you have to be credible. You have to be real, right? But so these guys basically knew. I made myself vulnerable, looked like an idiot, and they knew I was a real guy. I was one of them, and I was genuine, and that was the leverage. That is the leverage. That's again, and that's leverage basically whether you're going up to the board or down to the quote down, or the other way around, down to the board and up to the troops. That's and again, whether you call that, whatever you call that, servant leadership or authentic leadership or whatever, it's real, and you get conveyed. And leadership, of course, is the ultimate privilege, right? you get given this privilege by these people, and you owe it to them to to again give them their dignity and their respect. So anyhow, that was
Well,
kind of yeah.
that's what I love. And so, in special operations, we always say you don't get to build trust in a crisis. You can only build it ahead of time. And so,
Yeah.
you had built it over the course of your entire career, and,
Right.
unbelievable leadership downward. It sounded like when you talk up, the board, you had built the credibility where they said, we're not taking ownership of this, but you can do it. So that,
Yeah.
so they had the trust in you, but there was not a, we're in it with you. But that was,
No.
you stood alone in your conviction to say, I'm going to go do
Yeah.
the thing.
Absolutely. But you said they gave me the, if you want to put your neck on the line, go ahead. So that's all I needed. That's all I wanted. And they gave me that. They gave me that.
And then for your executive team, usually leading peers, now they worked for you, but much more, the closest inward team, obviously marketing was on board because they presented the information to you.
Yes. Exactly.
Did it start with just one? It was just the two of you. And then how did it work? Did you win over time? Like for us, when we started in 2001, every single entity was working off on their own after September 11th. And so, as you know, if you ever want to know how important a Navy SEAL is, just ask us, we'll tell you. And so the egos prevented us from working as a we. We was just the SEALs, not everyone. And so, any exciting nuances of who was the next? The first follower was marketing, right? That joined you. Who was the next that started to get on board, and how did you then build the flywheel momentum?
Yeah, it was, and it actually happened relatively quickly. Once, I mean, again, their initial reaction was, "What the hell? Why are we doing this?" But I had this practice. I didn't have staff meetings very often, but I'd have them every, maybe a few weeks, and for this, basically, and my staff meetings kind of got together at 9 o'clock. I locked the door, didn't serve anybody lunch, and we just went through until we'd resolve whatever we were resolving. And this was one of those. So basically, I had my marketing guy, who was all in, right, and excited about this. And we failed, by the way. Our first two waters bombed out. Our first coffee bombed out. But anyhow, he was so we just presented the data, and these guys knew me. They knew the marketing guy, and we basically went through the data in terms of the fact that unless you got a better idea, of how we're going to take big share from Coca-Cola, who was bigger than we are, had more reach than we do, more money than we did. We were really the underdog. So unless you got a better idea, this is the idea. And basically, I'd say the guy that came on board the first, that's a good question, was the manufacturing guy who actually had the most issues. And how is he going to make bottled Frappuccino? I mean, hell, we don't handle milk. We don't have retorts. Ditto on the tea. He didn't have any idea of this. And I convinced them I was serious, because on the sports drink side, we just said, okay, well, if we can't make this work, we'll buy Gatorade, which meant buying Quaker, by the way. But we're going to get this done. And so the manufacturing guys jumped on board, and the sales guy, who was the last guy on board, because the finance guy was, this may or may not work, but we'll live with it one way or the other financially. But the sales guy was, again, he's representing these guys who said this is all foo-foo stuff. What's bottled Frappuccino? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So he took a little longer, but by the end of the day, and I never allowed voting in any board I ever worked on, much less my own company. You don't vote. You drive and drive and drive, and you get consensus, and you go. So I think it's by the end of one day, just a long day, no lunch, no breaks, no nothing. We're going to resolve this.
And what it sounded like, you're, of course, no change starts and just goes vertical. Like, first couple waters failed, first coffee failed. Was there a bottom of the trough moment where you started to doubt yourself, or where you started to doubt the strategy, or, hey, maybe the strategy's right, but can we actually do this? Was there a kind of a darkest moment as you were driving the transformation?
Well, I think there probably was a darkest moment, because, again, the idea was to do them simultaneously, which is maybe a questionable strategy. But yeah, that's what we did. And we launched Avalon, a water you never heard of, imported from Canada, H2O, which you've never heard of. And then we launched Aquafina, which started to take off. But before it took off, we had these two failures. I was still negotiating with Unilever. I was flying back and forth to Rotterdam and London to talk to Unilever to make a joint venture with Lipton. And then Starbucks, I met this guy, Howard Schultz, who I'd never heard of. Starbucks had a few hundred stores. It was a pimple on PepsiCo. I met this guy, Howard Schultz, and we were trying to come up with a product, and we launched something called Monstergram, which you never heard of, which bombed so fast. Principle of PepsiCo was really failed fast. Anyhow, so I was kind of like the coffee had bombed. Unilever was just bureaucratic, a mess. They have two companies, one in London, one in Rotterdam, the Dutch half and the English half. Anyhow, I couldn't get a decision out of them, and the water had bombed twice. I thought, is this really worth doing? But then kind of they all came together pretty quick in the next month or two. But yeah, I had a little doubt about, this. Maybe this was the ultimate long run for a short slide, but but things took off, and they're all, like I say, it's easy to talk about. They're all billion-dollar brands, every one of them, and we did buy Quaker to get Gatorade, um, but yeah, it was a little iffy at that point. A little, not sure this is a great idea after all.
And then was there a moment, sir, where you knew like the flywheel was turning, and then like what was the moment where you knew, okay, the strategies worked and we're off to the races?
Well, actually, it was with Starbucks. The water took off. We decided, screw all this, spring water and so on. We're just going to produce this stuff in our plants. We produce the best water in the planet in our plants. And we have 60 of these huge, massive. So we're just going to make this stuff and ship it out. And then the tea. Once we got the deal with Lipton, again, there was no ready-to-drink tea. And we had a great product, and we have this massive distribution system, right? We have 1 million customers that we can reach day one. So that blew off. And then with Starbucks, this is before cold coffee. Nobody drank cold coffee in those days. There was no cold coffee, and there was nothing in a single serve bottle or can. And once we got Frappuccino out there, we only introduced it in a couple of markets. It just took off. So all of a sudden, the three of them were all going. Hadn't made a deal with Quaker yet, but those three just started cranking, and of course everybody then said, "Oh, this was a great idea."
This is everyone's idea. A success has many fathers and many mothers.
Right. But
Well, that's fantastic story. Unbelievable story. Is there anything as you step out, just in general, your incredible breadth of experiences? Any like, hey, here's the top 3 things that you've picked up that you would want anyone else to know that feels like they're up against an impossible task? They're up against something they don't know the way through. And anything from your vast experience that you would want to impart just as general principles? I thought the vignette was one of my favorite of all time, but anything at the higher level.
well, I think I have this very simple model, and I've used this model as long as I can remember. That I think I have 3 tests, of kind of moving forward, to achieve anything almost, even personal. It's a little of a stretch, but basically to have a strategy. And again, I don't get hung up on objectives versus vision versus whatever. But what do I want to do and why do I want to do it? And the hows I'll figure out later. But do I really have a what and do I really have a why? So I kind of checked the box of I really spend time investing in the strategy, which I think is the easiest, by the way, of my 3 things. And the second is just, am I at the stage of my career, life, circumstance, whatever, that I'm prepared to push the envelope, take the risk, screw up, fail, whatever. Am I at the point where I'm willing to say, okay, I'm willing to pull the trigger? Because you have all this great stuff, but most guys at the end of the day don't pull the trigger. So if I get into this sucker, am I going to be able to pull the trigger? Do I have the guts to do it? And then the third is, am I confident that the people are going to follow me? Again, whether it's the board of directors or my sales guys, that people will follow me no matter how flaky the idea, no matter anything, that I can get followership. And I use that test, and that's kind of my test always. And again, strategy is the easy one. Good decisions, having courage, that doesn't take a whole lot of brains. You can just pull the trigger. But getting people to follow you, and again, I'm talking about people who follow you because they really want to. I mean, they believe in you. They'll follow you passionately. That's not so easy to get. I'm sure you've experienced that many times. But having that followership is that's a big climb, big hill, big thing to have in your quiver.
No, and I loved your reference earlier was leadership's a privilege, right? And so, like, to me, humans will own leadership is very simple. Humans will only surrender their autonomy to someone else if they'll get to a greater outcome as the collective than they would get to on their own. And so, for you to be able to create a collective belief that everyone's going to get 70,000 plus people are going to get to a better outcome by following you on
Yeah.
this crazy path or this path of innovation is a unbelievable
Yeah.
uh, privilege and gift.
Yeah. Again, I think it's like we've talked before. These things are acquired. I mean, the reality is that they're cumulative. Again, as experiences build on experiences, but you won't get them if you don't get out of your comfort zone, right? I mean, that's the dichotomy here, right? Well, I want to have this nice, comfortable life and career and so on, and I want to have great success, quote success, but I don't want to get out of my comfort zone. And of course, the further out of your comfort zone, the better off you are. But that's even at PepsiCo, I've had let's say I have 12 people, and I remember a couple of these. I'm offering them the job and to run in those days our Russian business out of Moscow, and it's big business, a couple thousand people, huge challenge and so on. And even guys, well, more than a few guys and gals uh, who were very talented, had good careers at PepsiCo and so on, or maybe at Frito-Lay. I'd offer them the job, and at the end of the day, they would say no, which always shocked me. The kids their kids were too young, their kids were too old, their spouse didn't want to go, whatever, something, and it was just as opposed to me, what would have been a plum job. I mean, the experience, the personal experience, the professional experience, the experience to broaden yourself, fly into Russia, fly into Moscow. I mean, but anyhow, but that's unfortunately that's the norm. Not that's the norm. Even at a PepsiCo with A+ guys, and we aren't quite the special forces, but we think we're close. We're the corporate equivalent. Otherwise, Coke kills us. So we have to, we just have to roll the dice all the time, or we'll lose. And even that group of guys and gals, 3/4 of them will say no. And,
Well, I think, sir, your second criteria, and I think what you're alluding to now is so powerful. And I know until I talked to you, I hadn't thought about that part of what am I willing to do to accomplish this strategy or mission? And so, but if it's okay, I'd love to have you explore one of the more courageous decisions of all of the many decisions you made was the decision, okay, I've had enough. I'm now not in the phase where I want to drive strategy anymore. And like how you came to that process, to me, an unbelievable, courageous decision.
yeah, that's a great question, Curt. So you mentioned as you. So my wife and I have been married 55 years now. Okay. And we have this practice that we had very young, actually, of setting our intentions every year. My intentions, Connie's intentions, and the intentions for us, and then we compare notes. And every year we go through this process. And during that process, kind of these great discussions about obviously, what do you want to do in the second half of your life, all that kind of stuff, halftime. And basically, I decided I wanted to retire, like 50, and didn't quite make 50, but pretty close. And ended up the CEO of PepsiCo at the time, Wayne Calloway, was diagnosed with cancer, and so anyhow, we all had to kind of make decisions on what we wanted to do, and I basically raised my hand and said I want to retire. And of course, the board thought that was crazy. It was 51, I guess. Everybody thought it was crazy. But Connie and I had made this resolve, and anyhow, a few things happened. And I became president of PepsiCo for a while, and then I did a big IPO for PepsiCo and other things for PepsiCo. But when I retired, I think I told you this. I basically had retired, and I was being pursued to be a CEO of a bunch of different. I was young, successful. I've been around the world. I've done a lot of oddball things, and so I was being pursued to be CEO of a bunch of different companies, and I just said no. I'm retiring. I wanted new chapter in my life. Connie and I had agreed to that, and but the big test was I got a call to from a, a headhunter I knew, and basically to have dinner with Warren Buffett and Henry Kravis. And Kravis at the time, KKR was pretty big tough, and Buffett was Buffett, right? And they had a job, and a big job, and a ton of money, and who wouldn't want to have dinner with Kravis and Buffett? I had to really kind of look at my whole card and talk to Connie about do we really believe the most important thing in our life is to walk away from this, which is wonderful, and we want to spend more time together. We want to work on our faith journeys, and we want to live more in creation, which is up here where I am. And so I told them no, and that was a big test of my beliefs and my intentions and passions, so I walked away from being a CEO, and never looked back.
Unbelievable courage, sir. It's always every time you shared your process for making decisions, like, of course you got to the outcome because of the coherent field and the energy that you convey. And so you've done anything and everything from pivoting massive organizations and what, if anything, is impossible to you now? I'm most curious because obviously you provide a huge service to everyone listening on like, wow, okay, it is possible, even when it felt like it was completely impossible. What's impossible to you now? This is the part where ideally someone who has a solution for what you're currently encountering can help you to make the next thing that's impossible inevitable for you.
Well, I could use any help and input I could get, because this is the impossible, and it's more impossible than everything I did at PepsiCo and the total beverage company. Because this I have no resources,
which is impossible for me to even imagine. So I can't wait for this challenge.
I used to have unlimited capital, unlimited cash, unlimited people, unlimited talent, unlimited everything, right, at my disposal. Now it's just me, and we're up here in the Adirondacks, and the task is the fact that, like all of rural America, which is like 60 million people, and there's like 4 million of them in New York, and in the Adirondack Park, which is the size of the state of Massachusetts, there are 130,000 people. Okay, 103 towns, 130,000 people, all basically dying. The towns are dying from population, and the people are struggling. And we've been here like 5 or 6 years, and so a couple of years ago, I said, "Well, I see this. We have people who help us out here. We go into town, and they're dealing with this impossible situation. The average high school here, just to give you one number, okay, over the last 30 years, there's like, I don't know how many, every high school, the average high school has lost 50% of their, so if they're graduating, whatever, 150 kids are now 50%, and that's every single school. And so all the jobs left, logging, timbering, sawmills, tanneries, mines, this is all extraction jobs, right? Good jobs, but all about extraction. So it's gone. So basically, how do you deal with this basically demographic decline that is staggering numbers? It's staggering for the rest of rural America. It's staggering for New York State, but here it's just boxcar multiplication of that. So basically, like rural America, there's issues with housing and daycare, childcare, and broadband coverage, and so on. But the issue here, and much of rural America, is there are no jobs, good jobs, and jobs with careers. There's a lot of tourists and so on, but there's nothing. And PepsiCo is not going to show up here, and anyhow, it is what it is. So the question is, so what do you do? And so I decided to go ahead and do my own. 2 years ago, I did my own research. Actually, hired a woman, a research type, and I did 50 interviews with the people that matter up here. The politicians, the business leaders. Talked to the governor, you name it, and basically came to the conclusion that there was only one possibility that I could even think of or imagine that would create jobs, and that had to be in the tech space, a tech ecosystem, of which most small places in rural America, they might have a university, or that we have not. So we have no assets up here. So how do you create a tech ecosystem with no starting point? So that's the impossible task. And so I did all the research. I spent a year, and then a year ago, I hired the executive. I convinced the foundation up here, the community foundation, to take on this project. I got a couple of guys to pitch in, so we raised like $500,000 to do it. And then we hired this fabulous young lady executive, a powerhouse. And here it is a year later, and we had a group of like 15 people in the little group, kind of tech adjacent folks. We now have 250. They kind of came out of the woodwork, but we have to create new jobs. And so we're kicking off our first pitch event, with the idea. This is not early stage. This is just pitch. But we basically need a startup hub here, a startup culture, and it's not so simple to do. But I've lined up a bunch of mentors, some guys with money, some advisors, like some marketing types, a couple of lawyers. So if we can come up with the ideas, so if we're having a pitch event, hopefully we're going to have 6 good ideas presented to us. We're going to start with that, which is talk about embryonic, right? But
Absolutely.
we can start there, then we can slowly build our way to some tech environment, tech ecosystem, and create over time, a couple hundred, 300, 400, 500 good paying jobs. And that's the task. That's the impossible task. And right now it looks totally impossible. So it's off the ground. That's the only good news. And we're having what are we calling it? I wrote it down here someplace. It's the one I sent you. Oh, the Adirondack Launchpad. That's the event. We're going to have that event in November. And I'll let you know what happens.
Absolutely. How does someone reach out to apply to the Launchpad?
They can Google A2I Adirondack Innovation Initiative, and you can get the material, and you can submit a proposal. So,
well, it sounds like you've already built, in terms of laying the groundwork. You've built the first systems that you've laid out from 1, 2, and 3. Like, hey, second phase I'm in. First, the strategy is, okay, here's the most viable course we have. We're going to try water. We're going to try coffee. We're going to try whatever it is. And then it sounds like already a community of 250 that now wants to do it. So the most exciting part is you really repeated the exact same playbook for a very different challenge, right? And now you've established, hey, we're trying to save these towns. Everyone's completely vested at the highest level.
yeah.
And so really exciting now, okay, we need ideas. And the fun part is you can have anyone come from anywhere that has an idea that wanted a place where you could have the resources, you can have the capital, and most importantly, the mentorship. When we lift our Thor's hammer, what's ours to do, the scariest part is, how can we build a community around us to support it? So it sounds like you've already created the community of support, and now it's looking for the ideas to be able to step into.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Curt. I think we've created this. Again, it's embryonic and fragile, and it's not a PepsiCo, but we've created it, and the question is, so will anybody come? We've done the homework, we've laid the groundwork, got some track, and will anybody come? Will anybody actually show up? And we got a few connections in some oddball places down in New York or Boston, and there's 1,000 tech types. 20 of them must want to live on a lake like I do, and go hike in the woods and listen to the moose and the coyotes at night and the loons. I mean, so there are some people who, and you can certainly, these are obviously, these are tech, internet based, service kind of industries that we're hoping to start. And you don't need capital these days. You don't need much. AI has made it much simpler. If you got the idea, well, again, it's kind of back to if you got the strategy and you got the courage to pull the trigger, right? Then you just need to find the way to persevere and drive and lead it. So,
Well, I'm excited to have this recorded on October 2nd of 2025, so that when you manifest the next impossible task and have six different business endeavors running, and you're growing the community and the technology. So super excited, sir. Any Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us
Oh,
today. Any other final parting shots or perspective that'd be useful for you to share?
well, I think, well, just one little thought I was thinking is, my model these days, is, and I task myself to, my simple model these days, beyond my little three things, is to make sure my heart is connected to my gut and connected to my heart. And I think for me, I've learned I'm better at gut than heart or brain. But I try to make sure, that I'm really connecting my brain and my gut and my heart, and that's a test for me. And the other is we talked about is I believe in this being grounded every day, and so I still find a way, to work out or run every morning, to do my little readings, my little daily, Bible reading, and then I again remind myself I'm going to touch at least two people today. I mean, touch them, personally touch. And it's harder to do up here. I don't have thousands of people around me. I'm not touring some bottling plant with 300 people, but even so, I can still touch people, and so that's my little grounding model, and I've lived it forever. I still live it, and it's my way of, again, of just getting my mind and my heart, my soul, all on the right page. I think. I hope.
And I love the brilliant model for having a huge vision, you know, daily practices, and because I see so many times it's so, like, to your point about pulling the trigger, it's so easy to have a huge vision, say I don't know how to do it yet, so I'm not going to start. And I love, but every single day I'm going to get myself into state. I'm going to get mind, body, spirit integration, and I'm going to do positive good for at least two people
Right.
every single day, regardless. And so I love the think big, start small, move fast. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
unbelievable wisdom, sir. Thank you for your grace, your wisdom, the impact you've had on me, and ideally on everyone you come in contact with. So thanks for sharing your time today, sir.
Thank you, Curt. I enjoyed it, and it was a unique and out of my comfort zone experience for sure. So.
Thank you, sir.